I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and today we begin our journey into the non-kaiju-centered tokusatsu films produced by Toho, starting where it is most prudent to do so, at the beginning.
Doesn't this movie sort of skirt the line? It does have something that's generally counted as a kaiju in it.
True, but I still think it should be counted. Our subject is the 1957 alien invasion epic, The Mysterians. In the countryside around Mount Fuji, a number of mysterious disasters occur. A forest fire breaks out in which the trees burn from the roots. A sudden landslide devastates a small town. Traces of radiation are found in the affected areas. And then there's the disappearance of astrophysicist Ryoichi Shiraishi, who has been writing about a controversial theory that the solar system's asteroid belt was once a planet named Mysteroid. The strangeness only deepens when an enormous mechanical monster emerges from underground and wreaks havoc until it is destroyed by demolishing a bridge. What does it all mean? The answer presents itself when a dome rises from the affected area, and 5 Japanese scientists are invited inside. The occupants are aliens from the planet Shiraishi identified as Mysteroid, and it turns out that this theory was spot on. Mysteroid was devastated by nuclear war centuries ago, and the surviving Mysterians have been scraping by on Mars ever since, but Earth is far better suited to their needs. The Mysterian leader insists that they are pacifists by nature, and all they want is a 2-mile stretch of land and some human women to produce offspring with. Humanity doesn't buy a single word of it, so of course you realize this means war. All of mankind is united to repel these alien squatters, but is human technology any match for that of the Mysterians, who have had centuries to prepare? The Mysterians was Toho's first alien invasion film, made by the same crew that made Godzilla, and like Godzilla, they set out to make it different from the norm. While you can still see some influences from other alien invasion films of the era within it, the Mysterians really does still manage to stand out from the crowd. The best place to start is with the visuals. By the 50s, most Western movies about aliens took very minimalistic approaches to their spacemen. Consider the interior of the ships from Earth vs. the Flying Saucers. It's a large, cavernous room that is almost totally featureless. Aside from a display screen, a door that appears from nowhere, and whatever this thing is called, there's not much to look at here. Even the aliens themselves have very sleek outfits that look good, but are light on details. The aesthetic of the Mysterians, meanwhile, feels more like it's taking cues from sci-fi of the 1930s, but on steroids. The interior of the Mysterian Dome is filled with objects and machinery that look strange and aren't easy to rationalize. This thing, for example. What is it? Can you tell by sight what it does? Of course you can't, but it looks weird and futuristic. And that's before we even get to Mogera, the most infamous robot in Tokusatsu history.
Robot or kaiju?
The answer is yes, Snazzy, but I don't think we should let that technicality stop us now. Let us acknowledge the obvious. Mogera looks ridiculous. He looks like a metallic Muppet, and when you first see him, you're more likely to laugh than be awestruck. That being said, the ridiculousness of his appearance is memorable, and the execution of the suit ultimately does work. To be honest, I kind of feel like the ridiculous aesthetic is needed, because without it, Mogera wouldn't be all that memorable. His only characteristic is that he walks forward and occasionally shoots lasers at something, which doesn't make for a very interesting monster. Then again, that lack of personality makes more sense for a robot than it does a living creature, which certain recent films seem to forget. So for as silly as Mogera looks, I'm willing to give that a pass simply because that's the one thing that makes him distinct. But humanity also displays some bizarre technologies in this film. It mostly consists of massive flying craft that would fit right into a Jerry Anderson series. Or is it Gary Anderson? Well, whatever, the Thunderbirds guy. The ships don't look completely unattainable for the time, though I'm sure the logic behind how they function falls apart if you really think about it. Then, of course, you have the Markalite FOP. These are radio-controlled devices that look like huge radar dishes, and they serve as mankind's most effective weapon in the fight. In some ways, you might call them the predecessors to the Maser tanks that would eventually become a staple of the Godzilla series.
But is the Mysterians all spectacle? Certainly not. Much like Godzilla, there's deeper stuff at play here.
Obviously, there's a strong anti-nuclear message, as you might expect. We are told that the planet Mysteroid was obliterated specifically by nuclear warfare, and the prospect of mankind nuking the Mysterians is labeled a last resort in the event of everything else failing.
But the Mysterians has more to say than just nuclear weapons bad. In fact, its themes are intricately layered.
The most obvious next layer is frequently discussed throughout the film. It's noted that the Mysterians are not all too dissimilar from humans, and their fate of being condemned to wander the stars and eke out a living on inhospitable worlds is one that we as humans might face if we're not careful.
Even during the final battle, we see an odd parallel between the two factions.
Remember how I said that Mogera doesn't do much other than move forward and shoot lasers? Well, that same description can be applied to the Markalite FOP cannons, which do nothing but move forward and shoot lasers. We also see mankind develop some fantastical flying machines right out of a Flash Gordon comic strip, and they seem to parallel the Mysterians' flying saucers.
It's played with subtlety, but these visual parallels reinforce the idea that humanity is already on the same path as the Mysterians, and needs to be very careful moving forward.
This stands in stark contrast to your average sci-fi films of the era, which usually made a point of drawing a clear line between the humans and the aliens, showing the former to be capable of overcoming that fate simply because, as John Crichton put it, humans are superior.
But there is an even more insidious side to the Mysterian race, by which I mean I'm pretty sure they're attempting to gaslight humanity.
As stated, when the Mysterian leaders meet with human scientists for the first time, they claim to be a peaceful people who have abandoned the violent ways of their ancestors, and they only wish to have a few small concessions from the Earth so they might rebuild.
Yet the evidence doesn't stack up to support these claims.
The leader says they only strike when struck first, but between the fires, the landslides, and the giant robot, there's no denying that the Mysterians are the instigators of this conflict. Oh, but that was to avoid total war, you see. Mysterians are not violent or untrustworthy. All they want is a 2-mile plot of land and a few women to marry, which they ask nicely for, after revealing they've already set up camp on that land and forcefully kidnapped some of those women. But they are peaceful, and like any peaceful people, they'll instinctively pull guns on you if you call them out for their hypocrisy and subversive methods. But the leader still insists that they are pacifists, even with his subordinates taking aim. No, it is mankind who is violent. Mankind attacked first by destroying the robot that was in the process of leveling a village as part of a preemptive strike.
Okay, that looks pretty bad, but that was just to prevent an even greater conflict, you see. What you call an excessive show of force meant to scare the other side into surrendering is, well, exactly that.
Throughout the film, the Mysterians constantly attempt to redefine the boundaries of violence by insisting that their actions are not violence, while simultaneously claiming that the actions of mankind are.
Boy, if I were a more political channel, I would take this opportunity to draw parallels between the Mysterians and certain organizations that have made headlines in recent years. But that would send us down a rabbit hole from which we might never emerge.
I'll just leave the political diatribe unsaid, because honestly, this sort of hypocrisy can be applied to any major group that's ever turned up or ever will turn up. In the end, it's a lesson everyone can benefit from learning as we move ahead.
Anyway, I hope all of that demonstrates what the Mysterians has going for it.
If you haven't seen it yet, you really should. Just as Godzilla raised the bar for giant monster movies, the Mysterians raised the bar for alien invasion movies. There's a lot of subtext, and the message manages to remain timely despite the passage of nearly 6 decades. Even with its eccentricities and flaws, it deserves to be called a classic.
That's our first film down. Next time, a foray into the realm of horror. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Yes, if I saw a life-sized Mogera coming towards me, I would still run away. But I'd be laughing the whole time.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books: Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.